to Crypto Clothesline. We're glad to be here with you, hanging out the crypto laundry, getting all the crypto info for you. Crypto Clothesline. Crypto Clothesline.
Amy Rose, hello, how are you?
Hello, Abheeti. Awesome. I'm really excited about this week because we're about to meet my hero, my Aussie icon, in a pretty epic little interview, I must say.
But how are you? I mean, we're going to talk about Jemma in a second, but how are you?
All right. Yes. Well, I'm feeling quite excited because of that. So I'll just let that slide for a second and come back to that, I guess. I guess, under the pump, sick kids and stalking kids, you know, the ones that are just like nonstop, you wearing them like clothing. That's my 18-month-old. Painful.
Oh, man. I was thinking like, because we work from home too, and, you know, take work from home and then sick kids, and you've got like, this is my boundary. Mummy's at work now. I'm closing the door, which is the same as drawing a line in the sand on a windy day. Ma'am.
There is absolutely. Oh my God, I hate the word. I'm changing my name. Do not say that word again. I remember I was just like, it was just a couple of months ago with my son. I'm like, say mum. I just wouldn't do it. And now I'm just like, oh God, please stop saying this word. Right now.
Not me. Go and talk to your mother.
How about you, Abheeti?
My stalkers are a little older than that. They've moved on to mum's in the other room doing some work, so we'll turn on the Xbox, which is, which is kind of easier in a way. But A, I hate television babysitters, and B, I hate, any other kind of screen babysitters. So I'm trying to find that possibly impossible balance between being a working mum, working from home, having kids look up books and do puzzles and do crafts of their own volition rather than turn on screens.
That is just really hard to do.
Yeah, they're convincing me of that more and more every day. But I just don't want screen dummies. You know, I want kids with creative imaginations and things. And I'm probably going to attract some ire from listeners here. I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but I'm really strict on how much screen time they get. So that's been a bit of a battle.
I have to agree. It's been a battle for me. We don't have a TV, but we do have a spare laptop that has, well, I think they're educational, but then I accidentally overheard something that was, you're disappointed in some of the content when you think it's something awesome and then you're like, oh my God, I trusted this. Why did I do? So yeah, I understand. There's a laptop that we use, but you just wish you didn't have to do it. You either have to scrap what you're doing or sit down with your kids every day and completely monitor them 24/7.
I try and have that connect time, so I've got quite clear boundaries about when I'm working and when I'm connecting with them. I try to have that. But I always feel like I'm letting you down if I'm not getting the work done, or I'm letting them down. I know you don't expect it of me, but
it's a battle.
It is. So I try to be productive in the times that I'm at work, and then I say, okay, now I'm with you. So yeah. And then I'm often up till 1 o'clock in the morning when they're asleep. So it's kind of a win-win, lose-lose situation.
It is. And they just want to be involved. They just want to jump on the podcast, which we're very lucky today that they're not hovering around.
That's right.
I did a Facebook Live about crypto wallets yesterday. I don't know if you saw it.
I did. I loved it.
And then in the background, everyone would have heard this coughing child.
But I think that just goes to show everyone that we're real and that we're not just, cut out cardboard, whatever. We're real mums, and we're balancing all these balls in a crazy world.
And I'm so glad we can embrace that.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Like a full 3D mum.
3D.
Yeah.
Everything.
A robot could not do what we do. Yes.
But speaking of which, I know we didn't necessarily cover it with Jemma, but getting onto Jemma, wasn't it amazing? We had a pre-chat with Jemma, and she talked about how she does do everything she does, and it was really inspiring. I've taken a lot away from that.
Yeah, the delegation key, that little golden nugget.
Oh gosh!
And we spent this week being pretty good at delegating. I definitely have, anyway.
Yeah, I've got to find someone to delegate to.
She's just so impressive. I mean, she's another one of those people who, quite similar to a lot of people we interview in the podcast, who have just fallen into blockchain and crypto, where it feels like, I guess because it's new, obviously no one can have done a degree in it, so people have to fall into it. But, you know, she's got her various degrees. She's just like the world's most amazing human. She's a disruptor. She's a disruptor in JP Morgan and a disruptor in blockchain.
So Jemma Green is one of the co-founders of Power Ledger, and that is one of the disruptive technologies that she has been involved in and that we're going to be speaking about. We are speaking about with her in the interview.
We are. And I think we should just play it, Abheeti, before we give too much away, because we've got that problem, don't we? Just oversharing.
Let's have a listen.
Hi, Jemma. You are with Amy Rose and Abheeti, and our podcast is, I don't think we even told you what our podcast is called, but it's Crypto Clothesline.
Oh, Crypto Clothesline.
Okay. Yeah. We basically hang stuff out, we air it out, and we chat about stuff that's going on in the space, especially in blockchain. That's my passion, but obviously people are a little bit taken with the cryptocurrency aspect too, so we do dabble in that as well. Our first question for you is, you've got a Bachelor in Commerce. Now, I have watched some of your, I guess, bio videos on YouTube where you talk about your history. But for our listeners, could you tell us how you came from that finance industry into blockchain?
Absolutely, yeah. It happened quite by accident. So I did a finance degree here in Perth, and then I moved to London. My dad's Irish and I have an EU passport, and I went and live in London for a year, and given my degree, I got a job in banking, extended another year, and this happened for literally 11 years in a row. So I ended up staying 11 years and working in banking the whole time. The first half of my time in London, I was in mainstream finance, and then halfway through, by virtue of doing a recycling project that I self-initiated, I became really interested in sustainability, and I went on to study a couple of postgraduate diplomas and then a master's in sustainability at Cambridge University. And partway through my studies, JP Morgan, the bank I was working at, set up a global environmental and social risk management unit, so looking at its lending in developing countries for high-risk environmental sectors, so mining, oil and gas, power, heavy manufacturing. And I was chosen to help set up that team and worked in it for 6 years. And in 2012, after submitting my master's thesis, I thought I needed to take a sabbatical, and so I took leave of absence from JP Morgan and went backpacking for about 9 months. And I went and hiked across Spain and did the Camino de Santiago, and then I'd never hiked before, but I became quite obsessed with hiking, and I went on to go hiking in Nepal and Israel and then South America. And while I was walking, all these ideas popped into my head. One of them, which I couldn't kind of rid myself of, was the idea of building an eco-village. And I thought it was a bit wacko, but anyway, I eventually shared it with a friend of mine who's a professor in Europe, and he suggested I speak with Professor Peter Newman in Perth at Curtin University. And I reached out to him and said, look, I'm a returning West Australian, this is my background, and I want to build an eco-village. And he wrote back saying, that's a great idea, and we should do that in Fremantle. And he copied in the mayor of Fremantle. And then I basically, after the 9 months travel, I returned to Perth, and I was originally going to move to Sydney or Melbourne because that's where all the banks were. So I thought I need to be there to really, get a job based on my experience. But I kind of got persuaded to apply to do a PhD with Professor Peter Newman and have the eco-village be a case study as a part of the doctoral research.
Yeah.
That's what I did. And I was looking at electricity market disruption, drawing on disruptive innovation theory from Professor Clayton Christensen from Harvard University. And I saw in Australia that we have a lot of households with rooftop solar, but hardly any apartment buildings, which are about 30% of the housing stock, and growing as we create more dense cities and more urban infill projects. And I saw that the legislation that governed apartment buildings, strata law, meant that the building could sell electricity to the residents without the need to have a retail electricity license. Mm-hmm. And I got really excited by this because I saw that you could create these kind of microgrids with solar and batteries in apartment buildings and increase the uptake of renewables, because up until now, that part of the housing stock had really been locked out of the renewable energy market. I thought that if you could have a system that would allocate electricity to each apartment, and if someone wasn't home to consume their allocation, they could trade it with their neighbours. But I couldn't find any software that did that. And then by chance, a former JP Morgan colleague of mine from Sydney introduced me to a couple of blockchain developers here in Perth. And I had a meeting with them January of 2016, and I just had a baby about 6 weeks earlier.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, they came over to my house. My mum was there helping me look after my daughter, Amelie. And they were talking about this blockchain. I'm like, what the hell is this? I have no idea what they're talking about. I thought they might have been a bit crazy.
Yep.
And I said, what about electricity? And they said, oh, we don't know. Let's have a look. So we spent a couple of weeks looking into it, and I found some projects that were using the blockchain. And I introduced the blockchain developers to Dave Martin, who's one of the co-founders and managing director of Power Ledger. And he had worked in electricity markets for 2 decades and had seen structural decline in the use of the network because of distributed renewables. He instantly got very excited and went, oh, the blockchain could help reimagine the grid as a trading platform, as a transactive grid, and maintain the utilisation of the grid, which is very valuable, and therefore its relevance. And he said, I want to set up a company. Do you want to join me? And I said, hell yeah. And so we formed the company in May 2016. And with 2 products in mind, peer-to-peer trading across networks and peer-to-peer trading within buildings. And so we've since developed and deployed those 2 products in various scenarios. But it was kind of through, a series of accidents that it came about.
Oh, wow. Divine accidents by the sounds of things.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really interesting. And I was reading something recently about people who are rentals, because I've often wondered about that market as well. With the whole solar power thing, there are very few homeowners who own investment properties that are willing to spend whatever it takes to put, solar panels on the roof. And then I was reading something, I think it was Dave Martin who'd commented on something similar, that Power Ledger could potentially also help to address that issue for people by having, I think, solar panels in gardens or something of that nature.
Well, the technology could work in a house, a freehold house that's rented out, or equally an apartment building. The landlord could essentially sell electricity to the tenant. It's a much easier thing to deal with when you've got the shared system via an apartment building, but you do need to change the bylaws or if it's an existing building. So there are various steps that you need to go through to make it happen. But the research that I've been working on, so I do a part-time supervision of PhD students, and they're looking at the uptake of that, and they're about to publish an industry report which looks at that in more detail on how, because the strata law is state-based legislation. So in Australia we've got 6 states and 2 territories, so it's 8 pieces of legislation.
Wow.
And looking at how it needs to be considered in each of the different geographical locations. Yeah, I think that there's also applications for apartment buildings, office buildings and shopping centres.
What about outside of Australia then? If those state-based legislations are going to make things a little bit more step-by-step, depending on each individual state's recipe, how would that work then in the international realm?
Very similarly. In the US and Canada, condominium law is almost identical, and in Europe, freehold leasehold legislation. So it's fairly ubiquitous.
If Power Ledger is doing all this at the moment, or actually Power Ledger is doing all this at the moment, what do you see the future of peer-to-peer power transfer? Because I have so many power outages where I'm living right now. I'm actually surprised I don't have one right now because there's rain and that's all it takes. Do you think it's possible that whole suburbs will be able to use this technology? Is that something that Power Ledger is looking to develop in the future?
Well, if you look at like mass uptake of peer-to-peer trading, you could see a more low-cost and resilient distributed electricity market where not only the big market participants like big power stations can be involved, but households that have batteries could provide electricity to the grid and shore up supply in times of need. And it could be a very agile market that is, more real-time.
Yeah.
So I think that if you look at the systems that have more distributed electricity supply, if there is a supply interruption, you're far less likely to get widespread blackouts. And we've even seen that in the British Virgin Islands or in the Caribbean as a result of hurricanes Irma and Maria. Many of the islands have like a centralised generation and then undersea cables that power the islands. And when that centralised generation was wiped out, all the islands lost power. Whereas those that had their own distributed electricity generation on their own island, although the buildings were wiped out, the electricity is still going.
Wow.
So what that tells us is that it does actually deliver more resilient output.
Wow, that's really exciting. Basically, what that means is that it's a network of either apartments, it's a network of buildings, let's say an estate that I live in, all connected on the one network, not on a big network.
If you think about like an apartment building or an office building, that's like a microgrid, but it could be grid connected, so it can supply its own needs, but also sell or draw electricity from other sources.
Okay.
And the wider grid provides that kind of highway for the transactions to occur.
From what I remember, is there an electricity provider that you're working with at the moment?
There's several. We're working with the local provider here, Synergy and Western Power. We've also been undertaking trials with Origin Energy, which is the largest energy retailer in Australia. We've got about 4.3 million customers. Okay. We've done trials in New Zealand with a network operator in Auckland. We've also got projects in Thailand, which involves the network operator and the Thai government, and projects we've just announced in India and the US. So you can't, like Uber, for example, anyone can just get in their car and get on the road, whereas electricity markets, because they're generally regulated, you do need to partner with the energy companies, and that's both the network operator but the retailer. Yeah. And we call those counterparties application hosts on our platform, and so they're very much our partners. Regardless of the blockchain, their electricity markets are being disrupted, and these companies want to know what's the business model of the future for them. And it might mean that they have to kind of self-disrupt some of their incumbent business models, but they're very aware of this. The amount of distributed renewables and storage that's being installed now, they are now contemplating how do they ensure their ongoing existence in a distributed energy world.
That's interesting, because that was going to be my question, Amy Rose, before you posed it. I was going to ask you, how much resistance did you meet with from those existing retailers? Well,
I think that they totally get it, and certainly compared to a year ago, most of them understand the blockchain and they're interested to do trials. But I think that in terms of them contemplating what the energy market looks like and the role of blockchain, I think that's still being fleshed out, and many of them might like to have their own proprietary blockchain and just allow their own customers to trade peer-to-peer. But to be honest, there's not actually a great need for blockchain if you're just doing trading within one retailer. Where the blockchain really comes into its own is where you've got interoperability. So you and I are with different energy companies and we can still trade peer-to-peer and the process happens. So that's, I think, where the power of the blockchain will really come into its own.
Yeah.
And how does that affect the idea of it being decentralized? Because in my mind, decentralized was taking it away from the control or the interference, or however the correct PC term is, of those operators and people working independently. But effectively, we're going to be working hand in hand. Is that right?
Well, the blockchain means that the buyer and seller, like house to house, can trade directly with each other without the need for an intermediary. Like if you buy shares on the stock market is the intermediary, whereas peer-to-peer means you're direct. And at the moment, if you have surplus electricity, you sell it back to your energy company and you get paid for that every 60 days when you get your bill. But using the blockchain, the transaction is the moment the electricity spills out onto the network and is consumed by someone else, and the payment is exactly the same entry in the database in the blockchain. And so what it means is you get paid instantly that when you're generating the electricity, you're not having to wait till the energy company generates your bill and offsets it against your electricity bill.
I was going to ask you one more question, but I'm not going to ask you that question anymore because it's not appropriate to ask you how you manage it all when you actually do, and you're perfectly capable of doing that. But am I able to, I can cut this out if I'm not allowed to, but am I able to share that you're pregnant?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I have 5 months nearly 5 months pregnant and due to have a baby start of July, and it's my second child. I've got a 2-year-old. I manage all the things that I'm doing with a lot of support from my family and also the good people at Power Ledger.
Yes, wow. And Abheeti is way more of a networker than me, and she's been going to these things. Sorry, Abheeti, I'm throwing you in.
That's fine.
She's met now 4 staff members from Power Ledger who've been going to these blockchain meetups, and they're all women, and they're all really impressive, and they all think Jemma Green is also pretty impressive.
Like bumbling clowns then. But yeah, we do have a lot of really amazing women working at Power Ledger, and I'm really proud of the fact that there's so many women in technology working Power Ledger.
I was really impressed, Jemma, because at an event, which was a fabulous event, but what was overwhelmingly, blaringly obvious to me were that all the presenters were men, all of them. And they were great, and they had really interesting information, but I was sitting around and I looked, and there was an amazing, powerful woman to my right and an amazing, powerful woman to my left, including the ladies from Power Ledger who were sitting in the audience. And I was like, well, when are the women going to get up to speak? So when Dave Martin actually said, and these are our staff from Power Ledger, and he introduced the 4 different women, I was really impressed. I was really excited to see that was being represented, that important role that women are playing in this sphere.
Definitely, yeah. I think that the blockchain, it's a bit like a relational database, and I think that is probably a skill set that women, have an inclination towards. So I think hopefully it means that it could pierce the equality veil, if you like.
And the stereotyping.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I was just going to say, one other lady that we spoke to, she put it really well. She said she thinks that at this very early stage where we're sort of laying out the foundation and we're unrolling the plumbing, so to speak, that technological stuff tends to attract more of the men, whereas as the blockchain develops and we're creating more community and there's a lot more around communication and effective message exchange, that is really where the women will be stepping up and coming into their own power, just by nature of what comes very naturally to us. So I thought that was a poetic way of putting it too, and I was super excited.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's great art.
Yeah. Okay, well, our time is just about up. Thank you so much, Jemma, for joining us today.
Really my pleasure. I like what you're up to, and I don't know if at the end of your podcast you put any links and stuff, but if you did want, I'm a contributor for Forbes, so if people wanted to follow up, so the Power Ledger Telegram group and Facebook group.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Would love that. Thank you so much, Jemma.
The power of delegation. I love it. And I've just discussed with my kids the notion of doing homeschooling again. And I'm like, are you crazy, woman? And I'm like, there's always a way. There's always a way.
Oh, my God. Yeah, no. There's no delegating in that. Okay, thanks, Jemma.
Speak to you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That was so amazing.
Wasn't that an amazing call? What an amazing chat.
It was. We're so blessed to have her come on the podcast. We've actually got other people coming from Power Ledger as well.
We do.
In the future. Plus some awesome people on the ground. People who have just either started out in crypto or people who have been involved in it since 2010 or 11, who have been involved, but, they're not in blockchain and crypto technology, but they've been involved in Bitcoin for a very long time. We've got those coming up as well. It's pretty exciting. Everyone's saying yes.
It is because it's such a fertile space. It's a space where there's so much opportunity abounding that it feels like even people who have, who are so-called experienced, right down to the people on the ground who've really just got into it for the first time. It's a big yes space for a lot of people because we're all sort of, zipping around trying to work out what's going on. There's so much new technology coming out, so much news coming out every day. It's alive, this space.
It is. It's thriving. So I think that might be why everyone's saying it. That's why everyone wants to come onto the podcast. We're just lucky, I think.
Yeah, we're just wonderful. Come on.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Let's plug ourselves.
But isn't there someone else you've been chatting to recently, young Amy?
Oh, yeah. We're going to put one of our little, I wouldn't call them pranks, but this week I might put my little call to Subway in. And I've been making some calls to see who's going to accept Bitcoin. And I have to say, they're quite humorous. Not too humorous that you wet your pants, but, they're up there. I've also, you know what I've been doing, Abheeti?
What?
I've been looking for Satoshi. So I've been calling Japan and trying to find, but the hardest thing is I know I'm going to call Japan. I don't speak Japanese. And listeners, how many are going to speak Japanese? So I've tried to call places where I think Satoshi might be that also speak English. It's a really hard market to target, Abheeti.
What about Satoshi in the phone book?
Satoshi. You that poor guy. You heard about the poor guy who's
I did. His grandmother and stuff. Yeah.
But good idea. I will. But I don't know if they're going to speak English. I'll just answer it and I'll be all confused. But you Abheeti.
I speak a very poor version of Japanese from a university degree once upon a time ago. So
still, it's better than mine, which was from grade 2. Literally.
But as soon as I get past Ohayo gozaimasu, I launch into Italian, so I get the more confused ever.
Let's listen to my chat with Subway.
Thank you for calling Subway Systems Australia, regional office for Australia and New Zealand. If you know your party's extension, please dial it now. Otherwise, please choose from one of the following options.
Good morning, Subway Systems. Speaking.
Hi, is this Subway as in the Subway restaurant? Subway.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
I'm hosting a gigantic party with heaps of people who have a lot of Bitcoin, and we are wanting to have catering done, and we're all pretty health conscious. And I was wondering if you will accept Bitcoin.
That would be. I'm not sure why the store sent you to us, but it would be store specific. As far as I know, I don't think we do.
Because there's a store in America that's doing it, and I think they're really taking off because of it.
Yeah. What stores around you are in the best location for you? Because I can send it on to the franchisees of the store.
Yeah. I'm happy to get it from Brisbane, any store in Brisbane. I would take any. Yeah, and I'll just go and pick it up. And we'll need thousands of dollars worth, I think, rolls and rolls.
And what was your name and your best contact number?
Yeah, Amy Rose. Do you think they'll consider it?
I think so. It's going to be such a massive party. There's going to be Lamborghinis everywhere. So maybe you could get some publicity out for Subway. Yeah. I can't say for sure what the franchisees will say, but I'll definitely send it to all Brisbane stores. Okay, creepy. Well, I'll send that around now.
Would you be able to? Yeah. Would you be able to? Are they going to contact me, or will you guys be contacting me, or?
Oh, yeah, it would be the franchisee would be in contact with you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being so accommodating.
No worries at all. If you don't hear back in, say, by the end of the week, just give us a call back and I can follow up on that one. But chances are you probably should hear back before then.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy. Bye.
Hello. Amy Rose here to make sure you know all about our upcoming webinars and our online crypto courses. So if you know a newbie, if your best friend has no idea what you're talking about when you say Bitcoin, or your mum is totally confused about why on earth you keep talking about invisible money, send them to our webinars. We cut out the tech talk and deliver a jam-packed session of crypto goodness every fortnight. And you're going to need more. So we've built an online course. It's 10 weeks of video tutorials, complimentary consultations where you can talk to myself or to Abheeti. There's quizzes, access to the closed Facebook group just for students with live videos and support, study guides, all without the tech talk, and it's just put simply for non-tech heads. And this is going to teach you everything you need to know about everything you need to get you started in crypto and to make informed decisions. You're going to learn the importance of security because that is our main focus of the course. And at the end, you're going to feel inspired and enriched and part of a community support network that's there to ensure you continue to feel empowered in this ever-evolving space, something that Abheeti and I didn't have when we started out. We virtually had no one, and all we could do was Google. So you've got this in a package delivered just for you. So check out the comments and the notes of our podcast for all the links. Otherwise, we'll see you next week in the podcast where at the end, we're probably going to tell you about our course again.
Hanging out the crypto laundry. getting all the crypto info for you. Crypto Clothesline.